Please welcome Israel's ambassador to the United States, Yechiel Leiter.
Shortly after dinner, my esteemed colleague Ron Dermer will be awarded a special presentation. And please see my remarks now as an introduction to that award. Shavua Tov. When I left the Knesset plenum just after the President's historic address, I met Ron in the hallway and gave him a hug. I knew Ron was concerned about how I viewed the agreement that he had just brokered with the administration. I guess I wanted to convey to Ron that I was completely on board. That even though at the moment Hamas was not completely destroyed, his accomplishment was exceptional. The U.S. had signed a document which committed to the release of all of our hostages, the complete disarming of Hamas, and the demilitarization of Gaza, something that would have been unthinkable just a few weeks ago. This was an unprecedented success, and Ron, more than anyone else, was responsible for it. So I gave him a hug. But I guess I was a bit overenthusiastic because a little while afterwards he said that I almost broke his ribs. I didn't tell you at the time, Ron, but I'll use this opportunity to tell you now that with that hug, I went back about almost 2 years to the long hug you gave me when I sat Shiva for my son Moshe. You entered the tent of mourning and you grabbed me and you hugged me. It was a hug I will never forget. It was a hug of someone who had known his own personal loss and pain, of someone who understood the devastation in my heart. When I returned the hug that day in the Knesset, I was saying thank you in a way that words cannot convey. The question that I've been asked ever since assuming my position here in Washington, aside, of course, from the question of how it is that we're able to implement genocide, starvation, and ethnic cleansing without leaving a trace, is the secret of our resilience. And I think I've arrived at an answer through my own personal experience. When the PM called me, I was driving in the car, and actually it was preceded by a call from Ron, who said to expect a call from the Prime Minister. So I went off the side of the road, and 5 minutes didn't go by before the Prime Minister was on the call. Yechiel, he said, I'd like you to go to Washington. Are you ready to go? So he felt the hesitation in my voice and then followed up with a question. What would your son say? It was the perfect question, and in a split second I knew the answer. Not only the answer to whether or not I would go to Washington, but whether or not I'd be able to go on living. Not only for me, but for my son, whose life, a promising and beautiful life, that was cut short. I had been scraping myself off the floor every morning since he was killed, and now I had the opportunity to channel my longings for him and my pain into national responsibility. That, I've come to understand, is the secret to Jewish resilience. What do I mean? We've heard a lot about the Bible over this weekend. It's been, Matt, an incredible weekend. And I don't want to leave the weekend just with a dive into the Bible by Pastor Johnny Moore, a dear, dear friend. He was brilliant last night. But I'd like to bring you with me on a 10-minute journey into some Bible study in order to explain what I mean. Why was Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses the lawgiver, prevented from entering the Promised Land? He was destined to only see it from afar. So we all know he hit the rock instead of speaking to it. In modern parlance, we would call that choosing the military option over diplomacy. But what is the punishment of not being able to enter the land have to do with the sin, with hitting the rock? The answer, I believe, is to be found in the opening words of Deuteronomy, the last of the 5 books of Moses. Seemingly insignificant words, it says, "These are the words that Moshe spoke," or spoken by Moshe. Why is that so significant? Why do I find in that the answer? When God first appears to Moshe at the burning bush, and he tells Moshe, "Listen, I want you to create this legacy of freedom. Go to Pharaoh and say, 'Let my people go.'" What's Moshe's response? Moshe says, "I can't do it. I'm tongue-tied. Ki chvad peh uchvad lashon anochi. I have an impairment. I have an impediment. I am a victim from birth. I stutter." And what does God respond? God says, "Get over it. Don't claim victimhood." Speaking to the rock was imperative to set an example for the people of Israel. Get over your difficulties. Move ahead. Overcome. Don't claim victimhood. You'll be persecuted. You'll be libeled. You'll be driven from country to country. But don't recoil into victimhood. That's why hitting the rock and not speaking to it was so significant. Speaking would signify overcoming difficulty. And ultimately, Moshe did overcome. These are the words that Moshe spoke. From a victim-claiming stutterer, he became an orator. He became the orator. He became the lawgiver and the speaker to God and to man for eternity. Had we chosen victimhood throughout the ages, we would never have returned to the Promised Land. Instead, we chose resilience, to always overcome. And because we have always overcome, we have come home. Herzl thought this would end anti-Semitism. And Herzl was right about so many things, most things. But he was wrong about this. Most of the world has turned against us. We are supposed to say thank you when someone acknowledges our right to defend ourselves. Or when somebody says they acknowledge Israel's right to exist. Now imagine you say to somebody from Belgium, "We acknowledge your right to exist." Or you tell somebody from Burkina Faso, "You have a right to defend yourself." They'd laugh and walk away. But we're expected to applaud. Ron has a special appreciation for Golda Meir. And it was Golda who said in her Bubby-like eloquence, if we have to have a choice between being dead and pitied and being alive with a bad image, we'd rather be alive and have the bad image. In Auschwitz, we didn't have a choice. It was only death, and we weren't pitied. I'll tell you what to applaud, ladies and gentlemen. On my first day at the embassy, it was a Monday morning, January 27th, and my staff came in and said, listen, the Prime Minister just said he's coming next week. Joke's on me. And you have to submit your letter of credentials to the President before you can go into the Oval Office. And the White House is going to cooperate with us and expedite the system, but you've got to first present a letter to the Secretary of State, which you have to do tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning. I had just arrived in Washington. So they prepared a beautiful letter to submit to the Secretary of State. But I've been around the block a few times, and I noticed that the letter was kind of cut and paste. I kind of took my predecessor's letters and put it all together and came up with a wonderful letter, but it wasn't me. So I asked them to give me a few minutes of quiet, and I felt that this was a Hillelian moment. You know, the moment of tell the whole Torah standing on one foot. What was going to be my first sentence to the Secretary of State of the United States? This kid whose father came over here in 1938, a refugee from Hitler's boots, click-clacking on the cobblestone streets of Vienna with a quarter in one pocket and a crusty piece of bread in the other. And I thought for a few moments and I said, I represent a people indigenous to the land of Israel, period. Everything that we've experienced over the past 2 years, everything we've experienced since 1948, everything we've experienced for 2,000 years of exile is condensed into that sentence. We are a people indigenous to the land of Israel, and we don't make excuses about it. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the sentence that we need to applaud and to demand of the speakers at our dinners. When Matt asked me if I would present Ron with an award, I immediately began thinking of the most fitting biblical figure to compare him to. I know you're all starting to think now. My first choice was Joseph. Joseph, after all, managed Egypt's economy, and Ron began his career here as an economic attaché. Ron spent a long time in Washington and has served in the government as a minister in various capacities. And Joseph, too, spent time in a pit with snakes and scorpions. But I decided against Joseph because that would put me in a politically compromised position. Joseph served under Pharaoh. If Ron were Joseph, what would that make Prime Minister Netanyahu? So my second choice was Mordechai from Book of Esther fame. I see some nods here in the audience. You immediately sign on to that. Mordechai saved the Jews, good comparison, but he also saved the Persian kingdom from collapse, bad comparison. Like the 10 nuclear scientists who were banished from this earth in 90 seconds on June 12th of this year, Haman's 10 sons were hanged, right? But so was Haman hanged, whereas the Ayatollah, Ron, is still alive. So I decided that a third figure, the figure of Daniel, is the most appropriate. Now that may surprise you because Daniel is not among the most well-known of the biblical personalities. But in fact, Daniel's wisdom, moral fortitude, vision, courage, and integrity shaped empires. I've known Ron for a long time, but it is only since my service as ambassador that I have the merit to work closely with him and experience up close his wisdom, fortitude, vision, courage, and integrity, which have helped change the course of history, Jewish history, and indeed world history. I exaggerate not. And like Daniel, most of his accomplishments are off the radar, are not in the public eye. Of Daniel it is written, they could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Daniel's integrity was the foundation of his leadership, and so is Ron's. In every policy debate, in every argument around the cabinet table, or with foreign leaders, Ron's integrity shines. His interlocutors always know that it isn't personal interest or political intrigue lurking behind his words. Rather, it is his integrity that is speaking. And that is what is so convincing about him. It wasn't the position and the power that made Ron. It was Ron who made the position and used the power of his integrity to win favor, to convince, and to accomplish so much. The expression, to see the writing on the wall, is from the book of Daniel. God gave Daniel knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. Daniel saw the writing on the wall. He saw what no one else could discern. And so did God give Ron knowledge and understanding and discernment. He saw that a nuclear Iran was an existential threat. That was the writing on the wall, and he also saw how to defeat it. And he had the courage to stick to the course, together with Prime Minister Netanyahu, when others couldn't figure out what was written on the wall other than to succumb. Daniel was a man of both learning and spiritual insight. He could interpret dreams, read signs of history, and counsel kings wisely. When faced with impossible tasks like explaining Nebuchadnezzar's dreams, he sought divine wisdom, not human cunning. I saw Ron up close, wrestling over the most difficult moral dilemmas. War, when to go to war, how to conduct war, where to send the troops when his own son was in uniform. Which hostages to release? Which prisoners to release to get the hostages out? Each decision which had ramifications for years to come. What anchor do you turn to? What compass do you turn to? And I saw Ron looking to the heavens and asking, what is the right thing to do? What does God want from me? Like Daniel, though rising to the highest positions, Ron never became arrogant or self-promoting. Daniel said, no wise man can explain this mystery to the king, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. Ron's humility makes him trustworthy. He always deferred to the prime minister. In an environment where pride and politics are the mainstays of survival, his humility stands out as his strength. As in Daniel, With intelligence, integrity, and humility, Ron survived the lion's den. My God sent his angel, he shut the lion's mouth, said Daniel. Indeed, God sent us Ron, and he helped save us all from the group of Persian lions who came to devour. With his appreciation of Jewish history and keen political acumen, Ron understood that it is our generation of Jewish youth who would rise like lions and render impotent the genocidal regime in Tehran. Ron's consistency of service to the people of Israel across decades shows that his leadership is not situational, but is principled. He was always dependable, disciplined, and steady. These are qualities we cannot give up on, particularly not in these chaotic times. I have no doubt that even as the format changes, Ron will continue to serve and to lead. Generally speaking, the adage that no one is irreplaceable is correct. But there are exceptions. Ron Dermer is one of them. But so is Rhoda, as irreplaceable as Ron. Rhoda is irreplaceable as Ron, and she has asked for some time with the man she loves. Golda once said of duty to country, I had to decide in the simplest of terms what came first, my duty to my husband, my home, and my children, or the kind of life I truly wanted for myself. Not for the first time, and certainly not for the last, I realized that when duty and my deepest desires collide, duty must come first. For 25 years, Rhoda has put duty to country first. At all hours of the day and night, Ron was with the Prime Minister, not with her, even when she needed him most. In everything Ron has done, in everything he has accomplished on our behalf, there is Rhoda next to him, who in her wisdom and selflessness rose like a lioness to the call of a nation. We have all taken note. History has taken note, and certainly the God of Israel has taken note. We are now left tongue-tied, speechless, concerned about the future. But like Moses, we must overcome. And as long as we remain focused on the promised land and on those who help us keep it, like Ron and Rhoda, we shall overcome. Thank you. Thank you.